Sir, first class is for passengers who can actually afford it. Please move to the back. Those 12 words cost Pan Atlantic Airways $4 billion in exactly 45 minutes. They thought Marcus Sterling was just another nuisance passenger trying to sneak a free upgrade. They judged him by his hoodie, his skin color, and his silence. They didn't know that the man they were dragging off the plane wasn't just a passenger. He was the man flying to New York to sign the check that would keep their airline from going bankrupt. He gave them one chance. They called the police. So he made one call. This is the story of how arrogance destroyed an airline and the most satisfying karma the aviation world has ever seen. The sliding glass doors of JFK's Terminal 4 hissed open, letting in a gust of biting November wind. Marcus Sterling pulled the hood of his charcoal cashmere sweater up over his head. It looked like a $20 gym hoodie, but it was a bespoke piece from Loro Piana, costing more than most people's monthly rent. Marcus liked it that way. In the world of high-stakes venture capital, silence was leverage. At 34, Marcus was the CEO of Sterling Vanguard, a private equity firm that specialized in buying distressed assets, stripping them of their rot, and turning them into gold mines. He was worth a quiet $2.4 billion, but looking at him standing curbside with a battered leather duffel bag and a pair of worn Nike Dunks, you'd assume he was a college student heading home for Thanksgiving, or perhaps an off-duty mechanic. He stepped into the chaotic hum of the departures hall. His phone buzzed against his thigh. It was a text from his lawyer, David Klein. Meeting with the Pan Atlantic board is set for 9:00 a.m. tomorrow. Don't be late. They are desperate, Marcus. You have them by the throat. Price is $14 a share. Marcus smirked. Pan Atlantic Airways, a legacy carrier that had been bleeding money for a decade, was on its last legs. They needed a savior. Marcus was that savior. He was flying to their headquarters in London to sign the acquisition deal. If he signed, the airline lived. If he walked, 40,000 people lost their jobs. He walked toward the first-class check-in counters. The red carpet was rolled out, separated from the snaking economy lines by thick velvet ropes. The economy line was a chaotic sea of frustration, crying babies, yelling tourists, and stressed businessmen checking their watches. The first-class lane was empty, serene, silent. Marcus ducked under the velvet rope. "Excuse me, Sir Hay." The voice was shrill, cutting through the ambient noise like a serrated knife. Marcus paused and turned. A ticketing agent whose name tag read Patricia was leaning over her podium, her face twisted in a scowl. She wasn't looking at his ticket. She was looking at his shoes. "The economy line starts back there behind the pillar," Patricia snapped, pointing a manicured finger toward the chaos he had just avoided. "You can't just cut the rope because you're in a hurry." Marcus took a deep breath. He hated this part. "I'm not cutting, ma'am. I'm flying first." Patricia let out a short, derisive laugh. She looked at her colleague, a bored-looking man typing furiously, and rolled her eyes. "Sir, look, I've been working a double shift. I don't have time for games. First class is full. Fully booked. Now please get in the correct line before I call security." Marcus didn't raise his voice. He didn't pull the "do you know who I am" card. He simply reached into his pocket, pulled out his black titanium Amex Centurion card, and slid his passport across the counter. "My name is Marcus Sterling. I'm in seat 1A. Please check me in." Patricia stared at the black card. The weight of it hit the counter with a heavy clink. Her eyes widened for a fraction of a second, a flicker of hesitation. But prejudice is a stubborn habit. She picked up the passport with 2 fingers as if it were contaminated and typed the name into her terminal with aggressive stabbing keystrokes. Clack, clack, clack. Her screen flashed. Status VIP. Do not offload. She blinked. The system flagged him as a key commercial interest. She didn't know what that meant, but she knew what she saw in front of her. A young black man in a hoodie. Machine says you have a ticket, she muttered, not making eye contact. She printed the boarding pass and slapped it onto the counter without handing it to him. Gate B32. Boarding in 20 minutes. Try to look like you belong there, please. We have high-value clients flying today. Marcus picked up the pass. I'll try my best, Patricia. He walked away, feeling the familiar burn of indignation in his chest. He could have fired her. He could have bought the terminal. But he let it slide. He had bigger fish to fry. He was about to buy her entire company. Little did he know, Patricia was just the warm-up act. The walk to the lounge was uneventful, but Marcus skipped it. He wanted to get on the plane, put on his noise-canceling headphones, and review the acquisition contracts one last time. He arrived at gate B32 just as the announcement for pre-boarding began. We are now inviting our first-class and diamond medallion passengers to board at this time. Marcus stood up from the waiting area and approached the gate. Standing at the podium was the gate agent, a tall, imposing man named Greg. Next to him stood the lead flight attendant, who had come up from the jet bridge to check the passenger count. Her name tag read Brenda. Brenda was a woman who wore her authority like a weapon. Her uniform was crisp, her lipstick was a violent shade of red, and her eyes scanned the crowd with the suspicion of a prison warden. As Marcus approached the scanner, Greg was busy chatting with a passenger in a suit, a man Marcus recognized from the tabloids. It was Chad Kensington, a minor tech guru who had made a few million selling a crypto scam app, and now spent his days flaunting rented Ferraris on Instagram. Chad was loud, obnoxious, and currently complaining about the Wi-Fi speed in the lounge. Unbelievable service, Chad was saying, adjusting his expensive suit jacket. I expect better when I'm paying $5,000 for a seat. We apologize, Mr. Kensington, Greg said with a sycophantic smile. We'll make sure you're comfortable on board. Right this way. Chad breezed through. Greg beamed at him. Then Marcus stepped up. Greg's smile vanished instantly. He looked at Marcus, then looked past him, scanning for someone else. Boarding pass, Greg grunted. Marcus held out his phone with the QR code. Greg didn't scan it immediately. He looked at Marcus's hoodie. Group 1 only, sir. Group 5 waits until the end. I'm in Group 1, Marcus said, his voice level. Seat 1A. Brenda, the flight attendant, stepped forward. She crossed her arms, blocking the entrance to the jet bridge. She looked Marcus up and down, her lip curling slightly. Let me see that, Brenda demanded, snatching the phone from Marcus's hand. She stared at the screen. It clearly said Marcus Sterling, 1A, first class. She looked at the phone, then at Marcus, then back at the phone. This is a screenshot, she accused. It's from your app, Marcus replied. It looks doctored, Brenda said, looking at Greg. We've had a lot of people trying to Photoshop tickets lately. You know, trying to sneak into the front for free drinks. I assure you it's real, Marcus said, his patience thinning. Scan it. Greg finally held up the scanner. Beep. Green light. Brenda looked disappointed. She handed the phone back, but she didn't move out of the way. She leaned in close, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. I don't know how you got this ticket or whose miles you stole to buy it, she hissed. But I run a tight ship. No loud music, no harassing the other passengers. And if you ask for more than 2 drinks, I'm cutting you off. I've got my eye on you. Marcus stared at her. This wasn't just rudeness. This was hostility. Are you threatening a passenger before he even steps on the plane? I'm setting expectations, Brenda said sharply. Now move. You're holding up the line. Marcus stepped onto the jet bridge. The cold air of the tunnel hit him, but he felt hot. He texted David Klein again. Add a clause to the acquisition deal. Personnel review. Immediate. He didn't know that by the time this flight landed, a review wouldn't be necessary. The Boeing 777 was massive. Marcus turned left upon entering the door heading into the sanctuary of the first-class cabin. It was an ultra-exclusive layout, only 8 suites each with a sliding door for privacy. He walked toward Seat 1A, the prime spot. But someone was already sitting there. Chad Kensington, the crypto bro from the gate, had his jacket off, his shoes off, and his feet propped up on the ottoman of Seat 1A. He was loudly recounting a party story to a disinterested flight attendant. Marcus stopped at the entrance of the suite. "Excuse me." Chad looked up, annoyed. He took a sip of his pre-departure champagne. "Yeah, what do you want? Service galley is in the back, buddy." "You're in my seat," Marcus said. "I have 1A. You might be in 1F or 2A. Chad laughed. It was a wet, ugly sound. "Relax, pal. I like the window on this side better. Just take my seat over there. 2F. It's the same thing." "It's not the same thing," Marcus said. "I booked this specific seat for a reason. Please move." Chad rolled his eyes and pressed the call button. Ding. Brenda appeared, instantly descending on Marcus like a hawk. "Is there a problem here? I told you not to cause trouble." "He's in my seat," Marcus said, pointing at Chad. Brenda looked at Chad. Her expression softened into a sweet, apologetic smile. "Mr. Kensington, is everything all right?" "This guy is harassing me," Chad lied smoothly. "I'm trying to relax, and he's standing over me demanding I move." "I'm a platinum flyer, Brenda. Do I have to deal with this?" Brenda turned to Marcus, her face hardening into stone. "Sir, take seat 2F, now." "My boarding pass says 1A, Marcus said, holding his ground. "He is in the wrong seat. Check his ticket." "It doesn't matter," Brenda snapped, her voice rising so the whole cabin could hear. "It is open seating in first class when there are disputes. Mr. Kensington is a frequent flyer with us. We value his loyalty. You are obviously new here. You will take seat 2F or you will get off my plane." "This isn't a bus, Brenda," Marcus said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming dangerously calm. "Assigned seating is a contract. I paid $12,000 for this seat. Move him." The cabin went silent. The other passengers, mostly older wealthy white men, were watching. But they weren't looking at Brenda with disapproval. They were looking at Marcus with annoyance. "He's delaying the flight," one of them muttered. Brenda felt the eyes of the audience. She needed to assert dominance. She stepped into Marcus's personal space. "I am the purser of this flight," she declared. "You are being disruptive. You are refusing a crew member's instruction. That is a federal offense." "Asking for my assigned seat is not a federal offense," Marcus countered. "It is when you are aggressive," Chad shouted from the seat. "I feel threatened. He's looming over me." "I'm standing still," Marcus said. Brenda pulled out her radio. "Captain, we have a level 1 disturbance in the first-class cabin. Passenger is non-compliant and aggressive. I need security at the gate." Marcus looked at her. He looked at Chad, who was smirking behind his champagne glass. "You're making a mistake," Marcus said softly. "A very expensive mistake." "The only mistake," Brenda spat, "was letting you board." 2 minutes later, 2 Port Authority police officers walked onto the plane. They didn't ask questions. They saw a black man in a hoodie standing over a crying blonde flight attendant Brenda had started to fake tears, and a distressed businessman. "Sir, grab your bag," the first officer said, hand resting on his taser. "You're coming with us." Marcus looked at the officers. He calculated the odds. Resisting meant jail. Walking off meant he missed the meeting. But then he remembered the power he held in his pocket. He didn't need to be in London to sign the deal. He just needed a phone. I'll come, Marcus said. But I need to make one phone call before I leave the jet bridge. You can call your lawyer from the holding cell, the officer said, grabbing Marcus's arm. Don't touch me. Marcus recoiled. I am walking. I am complying. He grabbed his bag. As he was escorted out of the first-class cabin, Chad Kensington raised his glass. Bye-bye, tourist. Enjoy the bus. Brenda stood by the cockpit door, arms crossed, a smug look of victory on her face. And don't bother trying to get a refund, she called out as he passed. I'm filing this as a passenger disturbance. You're blacklisted. Marcus stopped at the door of the plane. He looked Brenda dead in the eyes. Brenda, he said. Do you know who owns this airline? The board of directors, she said confidently. Not as of this morning, Marcus said. As of this morning, I was supposed to buy it. He stepped onto the jet bridge, pulled out his phone, and opened the livestream app on his social media. He had never used it before, but the world needed to see this. He hit Go Live. Then he dialed the personal cell phone number of Sir Richard Halloway, the chairman of Pan Atlantic Airways. The war had begun. The jet bridge was freezing, a metal tunnel suspended between the warmth of the terminal and the luxury of the aircraft Marcus had just been ejected from. The two Port Authority officers, Officer Miller and Officer Ruiz, were standing a few feet away, conferring in hushed tones. They were confused. Usually disruptive passengers were drunk screaming or swinging fists. Marcus was standing perfectly still, his back against the cold, corrugated wall, holding his phone up with a steady hand. He wasn't shouting. He wasn't resisting. He was broadcasting. Marcus Sterling didn't have a massive Instagram following, maybe 5,000 people, mostly industry insiders, rival CEOs, and financial journalists who tracked his every move to predict market shifts. But when a man who controls billions goes live with the caption, Pan Atlantic Airways just arrested their new owner, people tune in. I'm currently standing on the jet bridge of flight PA-102 to London, Marcus said into the camera, his voice calm, almost clinical. I have a valid first-class ticket, seat 1A. I was denied my seat because a gate agent named Greg and a lead flight attendant named Brenda decided I didn't look the part. They gave my seat to a man named Chad Kensington, who arrived late but looked like he belonged. The viewer count ticked up. 500. 1, 200. 5,000. I am currently being detained by Port Authority. Marcus continued, panning the camera briefly to the officers who looked uncomfortable. I am not drunk. I am not aggressive. I am simply black and wearing a hoodie. Comments started flooding in. At Market Watch. Is this real? Sterling is the buyer at TechCrunch. Kensington is on that flight. The crypto scammer at AOC. This is unacceptable. Watching. Marcus turned the camera back to himself. His eyes were cold flint. I was flying to London to sign a rescue financing deal for Pan Atlantic Airways. They are $4 billion in debt. They have cash reserves for maybe 3 more weeks of operation. I was the lifeline. He paused, letting the weight of that sink in. I'm not signing the deal. The comments exploded. At Wall Street Journal confirmed. Sterling Vanguard pulling out. CNBC Pan Atlantic stock just dropped 4% in after-hours trading. Officer Miller stepped forward, hand raised. Sir, put the phone away. We need to escort you to the station for questioning regarding the disturbance. Am I under arrest? Marcus asked, not lowering the phone. You're being detained for trespassing on an aircraft, Miller said, though he sounded unsure. I have a ticket, Marcus said. It's not trespassing if I paid $12,000 to be there. But fine, I'll walk with you. He didn't stop the stream. He kept it running as they walked him back up the jet bridge, past the sneering face of Greg the gate agent. Greg was currently typing furiously on his computer, ignoring the scene. He looked up just as Marcus passed. "Hope it was worth it, buddy," Greg muttered. "Enjoy the no-fly list." Marcus stopped. He pointed the phone camera directly at Greg's face. "Say hello to the shareholders, Greg," Marcus said. Greg blinked, realizing too late he was being filmed. "Hey, you can't record me. That's illegal." "It's a public terminal," Marcus said. "And you're a public figure now. You're the man who bankrupted your own company." "Get him out of here," Greg yelled at the officers. As they dragged Marcus through the terminal, the live stream hit 25,000 viewers. Hedge funds were algorithmically scraping the audio. Sell orders were triggering automatically. In London it was 200 a.m., but phones were starting to ring. Marcus looked at the camera one last time before entering the police precinct at the airport. "Pan Atlantic stock is trading at $14.20, Marcus said. "I suggest you short it to zero." He ended the stream. The officers took his phone. They sat him in a holding cell. It was a cold gray room with a metal bench. Marcus sat down, closed his eyes, and waited. He didn't need his phone anymore. The bomb had already been dropped. The shockwave just needed a few minutes to travel across the Atlantic. London, 2:15 a.m. Sir Richard Halloway was asleep in his Kensington mansion when the secure line on his nightstand began to scream. It wasn't a normal ring. It was the red line, reserved for catastrophic emergencies, crashes, terrorist threats, or bankruptcy. He fumbled for the receiver, his heart hammering. "Halloway speaking." "Sir Richard, it's David Klein, Marcus Sterling's legal counsel." Richard sat up confused. "David, it's 2 a.m. Is Marcus in the air? We have the signing at 9:00 a.m. I have the champagne on ice." "Marcus isn't in the air. Richard." David's voice was like ice water. "Marcus is in a holding cell at JFK." Richard felt the blood drain from his face. "What, was there an accident?" "No accident," David said. "Your staff arrested him." "Arrested him for what?" "For trespassing while black, essentially," David snapped. "He was denied his seat. Your flight attendant, a woman named Brenda, called the police on him because she didn't believe he could afford first class. She gave his seat to a crypto influencer." Richard gripped the phone so hard his knuckles turned white. "David, please tell me you are joking. Marcus Sterling is our only option. If he doesn't sign tomorrow—" "There is no tomorrow, Richard," David interrupted. "Marcus just went live to 50,000 investors. He publicly withdrew the offer. He told the market to short your stock to zero. Do you know what's happening right now in the Asian markets? Pan Atlantic is down 20% in 10 minutes. "Oh my God," Richard whispered. He can't do that. It's a misunderstanding. I'll call the station. I'll get him out. I'll send a private jet." "He doesn't want a jet, Richard. He wants blood." "Let me speak to him," Richard begged. "Is he with you?" "No, he's in a cell. But he is allowed one phone call. He told me he's saving it for you. Expect it in 5 minutes. And Richard, if I were you, I wouldn't make excuses." The line went dead. Richard Halloway scrambled out of bed. He threw on a robe, his hands shaking violently. He ran to his home office and booted up his Bloomberg terminal. The screen was a sea of red. Pan Atlantic Airways PAA was free-falling. The phone rang again. An unknown U.S. number. Richard snatched it up. "Marcus?" "Good morning, Richard." Marcus's voice came through calm and echoed, sounding like he was in a concrete room. "Marcus, I am so sorry," Richard stammered, sweat dripping down his forehead. "I just heard. This is a catastrophic error. I will have that crew fired immediately. I will personally fly to New York right now. Please tell me we can still salvage this." "Salvage?" Marcus laughed softly. "Richard, I was sitting in a police car while your employee mocked me. I was publicly humiliated by a company I was about to save with my own money. I know, it's unforgivable. But think of the airline, Marcus, 40,000 employees, their pensions. You can't let one bad apple destroy a legacy." "It's not one bad apple, Richard. It's the rot. I saw it in the check-in agent. I saw it in the gate agent. I saw it in the purser. Your culture is toxic, and I don't buy toxic assets." "Marcus, please. Name your price. We'll drop the valuation. $10 a share, $8. "I don't want the shares, Richard." "Then what do you want?" "Anything." "I want you to ground the plane." Silence. "Excuse me," Richard asked. "Flight PA-102, it's taxiing right now. I want you to turn it around. I want you to bring it back to the gate." "Marcus, I can't. That's a disruption of service. The costs, the passengers. You have 40,000 employees who won't have jobs on Monday if I don't sign," Marcus said. "Turn the plane around, now." "And if I do?" Richard asked, his voice trembling. "Will you sign?" "If you do," Marcus said, "I will come back to the airport. I will get on that plane, and I will have a conversation with Brenda. If I like how that conversation goes, maybe I'll buy your airline. And if you don't like it, then you can explain to the bankruptcy court why you let your ego get in the way of survival." Richard looked at the stock ticker. Down 28%. The company was bleeding out $1 million a second. "Hold on," Richard said. He grabbed his other phone, the direct line to operations control. "This is Chairman Holloway," Richard barked. "Get me the tower at JFK. Get me the cockpit of Flight 102, Priority Alpha 1, inside the hermetically sealed luxury of Pan-Atlantic Flight PA-102. The unpleasantness of the last hour was already being scrubbed away. The first-class cabin was a sanctuary of soft lighting beige leather and the distinct expensive scent of warm eucalyptus towels. Brenda, the lead flight attendant, moved through the aisle with the practiced grace of a woman who believed she had just averted a disaster. She felt a smug, buzzing satisfaction in her chest. She had trusted her gut, protected her passengers, and removed a threat. In her mind, the man in the hoodie was already a memory, a footnote in a report she would file later about refusal to comply. She stopped at seat 1A to top off Chad Kensington's glass. "Here you go, Mr. Kensington," she purred, flashing her most professional smile. "Dom Perignon 2013. We apologize again for the disturbance during boarding. We try to keep the cabin exclusive, but sometimes filters fail." Chad kicked his shoes off, wiggling his sock-clad toes on the ottoman that Marcus Sterling had paid $12,000 for. He took the champagne without saying thank you, his eyes glued to a crypto trading chart on his iPad. "Yeah, whatever," Chad muttered, taking a sip. "Just make sure the Wi-Fi works. I've got trades to execute. That guy was a total vibe killer who comes into first class looking like a mechanic." "Exactly," Brenda agreed, validating him. "We have standards. Enjoy your flight, sir." She walked back to the galley where Sarah, the junior flight attendant, was nervously arranging the silverware for the dinner service. Sarah looked pale. "Brenda," Sarah whispered, glancing toward the cockpit door. "I don't feel right about this. He was really calm. He didn't yell. And his ticket, I saw the screen. It said VIP. Brenda rolled her eyes, unwrapping a fresh stack of linen napkins. "Sarah, honey, you're young. You haven't seen the scams people pull. VIP codes can be hacked. Hoodies in first class. That's a red flag. I've been flying for 20 years. I have a radar for this. Trust me, I just saved us a nightmare of a flight." Ding. The intercom chimed. The engines of the massive Boeing 777 roared to life, a deep, vibrating thrum that shook the floorboards. The aircraft began to lurch forward, taxiing toward the runway. "Ladies and gentlemen," the pilot's voice came over the speakers, smooth and confident. "We are number 4 for takeoff. Next stop, London Heathrow. Flight time is 6 hours and 30 minutes. Cabin crew, please take your seats." Brenda buckled herself into the jump seat near the front door. She closed her eyes, visualizing the layover in London. A glass of wine at the hotel bar. A little shopping on Oxford Street. It was going to be a good trip. The plane taxied for 5 minutes. Then the engines spooled down. The momentum shifted them. The heavy aircraft didn't accelerate. It slowed. Then, with a shudder of hydraulics, it came to a complete stop. Brenda opened her eyes. They weren't on the runway. They were on a taxiway. "What's going on?" Sarah whispered from the opposite jump seat. "Probably traffic," Brenda said dismissively. "ATC holds." But then the plane did something that planes almost never do once they leave the gate. It began to turn. A sharp, tight turn that swung the nose back toward the terminal. The intercom chimed again. But this time the captain's voice, that baritone of absolute authority, was gone. In its place was a voice that sounded thin, strained, and visibly shaken. Folks, this is the captain speaking." A pause. A distinct sound of a deep breath being taken. "We have received an urgent directive from company headquarters. We are returning to the gate immediately." A ripple of confusion went through the cabin. Heads popped up over the privacy dividers. "We are not experiencing a mechanical issue," the captain added quickly, as if sensing the panic. "However, we have been ordered to retrieve a passenger." "What?" Chad Kensington yelled from seat 1A, ripping his headphones off. "Are you kidding me? I have a meeting in Canary Wharf. We're turning around for someone who missed the flight." Brenda unbuckled her seatbelt. Her heart started to hammer a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Planes did not turn around for missed passengers. Planes didn't turn around for anything short of a heart attack or a fire. She grabbed the interphone handset. "Captain, it's Brenda. What is happening? The passengers are revolting out here." "Sit down, Brenda," the captain snapped. He sounded terrified. "We just got a call on the SAT comm. It was the chairman. Sir Richard Halloway." Brenda's blood ran cold. "The chairman calling the cockpit. He was screaming, Brenda. He said if we take off, we're all fired. He said we left the owner of the airline on the jet bridge." Brenda dropped the handset. It swung on its cord, hitting the wall with a dull thud. The owner. The memory of the man in the hoodie flashed in her mind. "Do you know who owns this airline?" "No," she whispered. "That's impossible. He was a nobody." The taxi back to the gate took 15 agonizing minutes. To Brenda, it felt like 15 years. Every bump of the tarmac felt like a gavel coming down. She looked out the porthole window and saw Gate B32 approaching. The jet bridge was already moving, extending like a finger of accusation. The plane stopped. The seatbelt sign pinged off. The cabin remained deadly silent. The wealthy passengers sensed the shift in energy. They knew that something massive was happening. The cabin door hissed. The heavy locking mechanism clicked open. Brenda stood in the galley, pressing her back against the coffee makers, wishing she could dissolve into the metal. She expected police. She expected the FBI. She expected Sir Richard himself. Instead, two familiar figures stepped onto the plane first. The Port Authority officers. They looked sheepish, almost apologetic. They stepped to the side, acting as a makeshift honor guard. And then Marcus Sterling walked in. He hadn't changed. He was still wearing the charcoal hoodie. He was still carrying the battered leather duffel. But the atmosphere around him had transmuted. When he left, he was a suspect. Now he walked with the crushing gravity of a conquering emperor. He didn't look at the floor. He didn't look at the captain who had stepped out to greet him with a pale, sweaty face. Marcus walked straight into the first-class cabin. He stopped in the center of the aisle. He slowly scanned the room. His eyes landed on Brenda. She flinched. She wanted to speak, to apologize, to beg, but her throat had constricted so tightly she couldn't breathe. Marcus held her gaze for 3 seconds, long enough for her to feel the absolute depth of her mistake, and then he dismissed her entirely. He turned his head. He looked at seat 1A. Chad Kensington was still sitting there, looking annoyed, holding his empty champagne glass. "You again," Chad scoffed, unaware of the shift in the universe. "Dude, seriously, we turned around for you. Did you forget your insulin or something? You're ruining my schedule." Marcus didn't yell. He didn't argue. He simply reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen and held it up, turning the display so Chad could see it. On the screen was a live video call. The face was unmistakable to anyone in the business world. It was Sir Richard Holloway, and he looked like he was about to have a stroke. "Mr. Kensington!" Holloway's voice boomed from the phone speaker, loud, distorted, and furious. Chad froze. He recognized the face. Sir Richard, get out of that seat." Holloway enunciated every word like a gunshot. Chad blinked his arrogance, faltering. "Excuse me, you are sitting in the seat of Mr. Marcus Sterling," Holloway roared. "The man who, as of 10 minutes ago, holds the debt-calling rights to this entire airline. You are occupying property that does not belong to you." I have a ticket," Chad stammered, shrinking into the leather. "Brenda gave me this seat." "Brenda does not run this airline," Holloway screamed. "Mr. Sterling does. Now you have 2 choices, Mr. Kensington. You can move to the back of the bus immediately, or I can have the police officers standing right there drag you off for theft of services and ban you from every one-world carrier for life. Decide. Now." Chad Kensington turned the color of ash. He looked at Marcus. Marcus wasn't smiling. He was just waiting. "I'm moving," Chad squeaked. He scrambled up. It was a clumsy, undignified exit. He grabbed his shoes, his jacket, and his iPad, dropping his noise-canceling headphones in the process. He didn't put his shoes on. He ran in his socks down the aisle, past the staring eyes of the other passengers, fleeing toward the economy curtain like a rat escaping a sinking ship. Marcus watched him go. Then he turned back to the empty seat, seat 1A. He placed his duffel bag in the overhead bin. He took off his hoodie, revealing a simple black t-shirt underneath, and folded it neatly. He sat down. He buckled his seatbelt. The click was the loudest sound in the cabin. Then Marcus turned his head slowly toward the galley. Brenda was still pressed against the wall, trembling. Sarah was standing next to her, looking terrified. Marcus lifted the phone again. Holloway was still on the line. "Brenda," Marcus said. His voice was calm, melodic, and terrifyingly polite. She shuddered. Yes. "Come here, please," Marcus said. She couldn't move. Her legs felt like concrete. "I said come here," Marcus repeated slightly harder. She forced herself to walk. It was only 5 steps, but it felt like walking to the guillotine. She stood over seat 1A, looking down at the man she had sneered at less than an hour ago. Marcus looked up at her. He didn't look angry. He looked disappointed. He held the phone up toward her face. "The chairman would like a word with you," Marcus said, "and I suggest you listen very carefully." The silence inside the first-class cabin of Pan Atlantic Airways Flight PA-102 was heavier than the aircraft itself. Just minutes ago, the atmosphere had been one of exclusive, club-like conviviality champagne flutes clinking the rustle of the Financial Times and the smug comfort of the elite. Now the air was sucked out of the room. The only sound was the low electric hum of the avionics and the terrified, shallow breathing of Brenda, the lead flight attendant. She stood in the center of the aisle, her hands gripping the beverage cart so tightly that her knuckles had turned a skeletal white. The polished veneer of the queen of the cabin, the arrogant smirk, the posture of absolute authority, the disdainful glare had evaporated. In its place was a trembling woman who had just realized she was standing on a trap door and the lever had already been pulled. In seat 1A, the seat she had physically barred him from 30 minutes prior, sat Marcus Sterling. He didn't look like a thug anymore. He didn't look like a security risk. Even in his hoodie and sneakers, he looked like exactly what he was, a man who could buy and sell everyone in the room without checking his bank balance. He sat with a relaxed, predatory stillness, his legs crossed, holding his iPhone up, with the casual indifference of someone watching a YouTube video. But on the screen facing the cabin was the live video feed of Sir Richard Holloway. The chairman's face was distorted by a poor connection and pure, unadulterated fury. His complexion was a dangerous shade of violet and sweat was beading on his forehead. This wasn't the polished Sir Richard who gave calm interviews on CN. This was a man watching his life's work teeter on the edge of a cliff. "Brenda," Holloway's voice crackled through the phone's speaker, amplified by the breathless silence of the cabin. It wasn't a question. It was a summons to the gallows. Brenda's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She licked her lips, which were dry and cracked. She looked at the captain, Captain Anderson, who was standing in the cockpit doorway. Anderson, a man who had flown fighter jets in the Gulf War, looked at the floor, refusing to meet her eyes. He knew the hierarchy of survival. He wasn't going to step in front of this bullet. "Sir Richard," Brenda finally managed her voice, a pathetic squeak that sounded nothing like the command she had barked at Marcus earlier. The situation was chaotic. We have protocols, visual assessments. I was protecting the integrity of the first-class experience." The integrity? Holloway's laugh was a harsh barking sound that made the passengers flinch. "You speak of integrity. Do you have any idea what the stock price is doing right now, Brenda? Do you know that in the 45 minutes since you decided to play God with Mr. Sterling, the market cap of this airline has dropped by $800 million? A gasp went through the cabin. The other passengers, investment bankers, oil executives, tech moguls, exchanged horrified glances. They understood money. They understood that kind of loss. And they suddenly looked at Brenda not as their protector, but as a contagion. "I didn't know who he was," Brenda cried out, her composure shattering completely. Tears began to streak through her heavy foundation, leaving jagged tracks down her cheeks. "He was wearing a hoodie. He had a duffel bag. He didn't look like them." She gestured wildly to the rest of the cabin, to the suits and the Rolexes. Marcus slowly lowered the phone. He didn't disconnect the call. He just set it on the tray table, propping it up against a bottle of water so Holloway could still see and hear. Marcus looked at Brenda. His eyes were dark, calm, and utterly unforgiving. "That," Marcus said softly, his voice carrying effortlessly to the back row, "is exactly the problem." He stood up. The cabin seemed to shrink. Marcus wasn't a giant man, but the weight of his power filled the space. He took a step toward Brenda. She instinctively took a step back, bumping into the knee of a passenger in 2A, an elderly oil tycoon from Texas. "Watch it!" The Texan snapped at her, pulling his leg away as if she were radioactive. The allies she thought she had were gone. You didn't know who I was, Marcus repeated, letting the words hang in the air. And because you didn't know, you assumed I was nothing. You assumed that dignity was a currency I hadn't earned. You thought that because I didn't wear a suit, I deserved to be humiliated. You thought that because I was black, I was a threat. I am not a racist, Brenda shrieked, the accusation hitting her like a physical blow. I have black friends. I voted for Obama. I was just doing my job, your job. Marcus interrupted, his voice cutting through her hysteria like a razor blade. Is to check a ticket. My ticket said 1A. My ID matched the ticket. The system flagged me as a VIP. But you decided you knew better than the computer. You decided you knew better than the boarding pass. Marcus turned to the rest of the cabin. He looked at Chad Kensington, who was currently trying to make himself invisible in seat 4F, having been banished from the front. Mr. Kensington, Marcus called out. Chad jumped. Yes. When you boarded, Marcus said, did Brenda ask for your ID? Chad swallowed hard. No. Did she scan your boarding pass? No, she just waved me through. Why? Chad looked at Brenda, then back at Marcus. She said I looked like I needed a drink. Marcus turned back to Brenda. You see, it wasn't about safety, Brenda. It wasn't about protocol. It was about your ego. You wanted to be the gatekeeper. You wanted to choose who belongs in your little club. Marcus leaned in close. He could smell the fear on her, a mix of stale perfume and cold sweat. Well, Brenda, I have news for you. I just bought the club. He picked up the phone again. Richard, are you hearing this? I am, Holloway said, his voice grim. And I am sick to my stomach. I am prepared to sign the deal, Marcus said. I have the papers on my tablet right now. I will inject the $4 billion. I will save the fleet. I will save the pensions of the pilots, the baggage handlers, the mechanics, the people who actually work for a living. Brenda's knees buckled. She grabbed the seatback of 2A to stay upright. Hope flickered in her eyes. He was going to sign. It was going to be okay. But, Marcus continued, I have a condition, a non-negotiable term that must be executed before my digital signature hits that PDF. Anything, Holloway said. Name it. I want a complete restructuring of the customer-facing personnel at JFK Terminal 4, specifically the individuals involved in today's incident. Marcus looked at Brenda, his gaze boring into her soul. Patricia at the check-in desk, Greg at the gate, and Brenda standing right here. No, Brenda whispered. Please, I have a mortgage. My daughter is in college. You can't do this. You did it to me, Marcus said, his voice devoid of sympathy. You were ready to send me to jail. You were ready to give me a criminal record because you didn't like my sweater. Do you know what happens to a man like me when he gets a record, Brenda? It ruins his life. You were willing to ruin my life for a power trip, so do not ask me to care about your mortgage. Richard, Brenda screamed at the phone. Sir Richard, I've been with you for 20 years. I was Employee of the Month in 2014. You know me. I thought I knew you, Holloway said, his voice cold and distant. But the woman I'm listening to just cost me $1 billion and humiliated my savior. You are terminated, Brenda, effective immediately, for cause, meaning no severance, no benefits, and I will personally fight any unemployment claim you file. The brutal finality of the sentence hung in the air. For cause. In the airline industry, that was a death sentence. It meant she would never fly again. Not for Pan Atlantic, not for Delta, not even for a budget carrier hauling cargo. She was done. Captain Anderson? Holloway barked. The captain snapped to attention. Yes, Sir Richard. Is Brenda currently listed as active crew on the flight manifest? She is, sir. Remove her. Update the manifest. She is no longer an employee of Pan Atlantic Airways. She is a civilian. Understood, sir, Anderson said. He pulled out his iPad, tapped the screen 3 times, and looked up. It's done. Marcus looked at Brenda. You heard the chairman. You are a civilian. And as you so eloquently pointed out to me earlier, this cabin is for ticketed passengers only. Brenda looked around the cabin one last time. She looked for a sympathetic face. She looked at Sarah, the junior flight attendant she had bullied for months. Sarah was standing in the galley, her hands clasped, eyes wide. There was no pity in Sarah's eyes, only a terrifying realization that the tyrant had fallen. Get off my plane, Marcus said. It wasn't a shout. It was a command spoken with the quiet intensity of a king dismissing a servant. Brenda let out a choked sob. She turned around. Her legs felt like lead. Every step was an agony. The walk from row 1 to the boarding door was only 20 feet, but it felt like 20 miles. She passed the older couple in row 2. They turned their heads away. She passed the tech CEO in row 3. He put his headphones back on. She passed Chad Kensington in the back. Chad muttered, "Loser," as she walked by, desperate to distance himself from her failure. She reached the door. The cool air of the jet bridge hit her face. The police officers, Officer Miller and Officer Ruiz, were still standing there. They had been waiting to see what happened. They saw the woman who had called them, the woman who had demanded an arrest, walking off the plane, alone, crying, clutching her purse like a life preserver. "Everything okay, ma'am?" Officer Miller asked, confused. "Where's the prisoner?" Brenda looked at him, her mascara running into her mouth. She tasted the salt of her own ruin. "I'm the prisoner," she whispered, her voice breaking. She walked past them into the terminal, into the blinding fluorescent lights of the airport, into a future that was suddenly empty and cold. Back on the plane, the atmosphere shifted instantly. It was as if a pressure valve had been released. Marcus sat down. He took a deep breath, letting the adrenaline fade. He picked up the phone. "She's gone, Richard." "Good riddance," Holloway sighed. "Marcus, I don't know what to say. I am humiliated." "Don't be," Marcus said. "Just be better. I'm signing the document now." Marcus opened the DocuSign app on his iPad. He tapped the screen once. Sent. "The money is on its way," Marcus said. "Tell the board they can breathe again." "Thank you," Holloway said, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you, Marcus. You have no idea. You just saved us." "I didn't do it for you," Marcus said honestly. "I did it because I like this seat, and I intend to keep it." He hung up. The cabin was silent, but it was a different kind of silence now. It was a reverent silence. Captain Anderson cleared his throat. He walked out of the cockpit and stood in front of seat 1A. He took off his cap. "Mr. Sterling," the captain said. "On behalf of the flight deck and the remaining crew, I want to apologize. We should have intervened. We were complicit." Marcus looked at the pilot. He saw a man who loved to fly trapped in a broken corporate culture. "You have a job to do, Captain," Marcus said gently. "Go fly the plane. Get us to London safely. That's all I ask." "Yes, sir," Anderson said. He turned to the cabin. "Folks, we're going to be pushing back in 2 minutes. Flight time to London is 6 hours and 10 minutes. We'll make up the lost time in the air." Sarah, the young flight attendant, stepped forward tentatively. Her hands were shaking as she held a silver tray. "Mr. Sterling," she whispered. Marcus looked up. "Yes, Sarah." I brought you a glass of water. Room temperature. No ice. Just how you asked." Marcus smiled. It was the first genuine smile he had shown since entering the terminal hours ago. It transformed his face, making him look younger, less like a titan of industry, and more like a human being. "Thank you, Sarah," he said, taking the glass. "You're doing a great job." Sarah beamed. It was the validation she had never received from Brenda in 3 years of flying. Is there anything else I can get you, Sir Champagne Caviar, a blanket?" Marcus took a sip of the water. He looked at the empty seat across the aisle. The seat where Chad had been, the seat where Brenda had stood, the space where the conflict had raged. "No, Sarah," Marcus said, reclining his seat, as the engines began to whine to life, the deep vibration of the GE90s rumbling through the floor. "I have everything I need." He pulled his hood up over his head, the same hoodie that had almost gotten him arrested. He closed his eyes. "Just wake me up when we land. I have a company to run." As the plane pushed back from the gate, Marcus Sterling didn't watch the terminal fade away. He didn't need to. He knew that inside that building a new memo was already circulating. He knew that the story was already burning through the internet. He knew that tomorrow the world would be talking about the man in the hoodie who brought an airline to its knees. But for now, he was just a passenger in Seat 1A finally getting the peace he had paid for. The karma had been served. The balance was restored. And as the wheels lifted off the tarmac, tearing into the night sky over New York, Marcus Sterling finally slept. And there you have it. The flight took off. But the shockwaves of that encounter are still being felt in boardrooms across the world. Marcus Sterling did not just buy a seat. He bought a lesson in humanity for the entire aviation industry. Brenda, Patricia, and Greg learned the hard way that prejudice is the most expensive mistake you can make. They judged a man by his hoodie and lost their careers because of it. Marcus, on the other hand, showed that true power isn't about shouting or bullying, it's about knowing your worth and refusing to accept anything less. He saved 40,000 jobs that day. He saved the pensions of people like Sarah and Captain Anderson. But he also sent a message that rang louder than any jet engine: respect is not optional. I want to know what you would have done in Marcus's shoes. Would you have signed the deal and saved the airline? Or would you have let them go bankrupt just to prove a point? It's a tough choice. Let me know your answer in the comments below. I'll be pinning the best responses. If this story of hard karma gave you chills, please do me a favor, smash that like button. It helps get these stories out to more people. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We have a crazy story coming up next week about a landlord who tried to evict a tenant only to realize the tenant owned the building. You don't want to miss it. Thanks for watching. Stay humble. And remember, be careful who you judge. The person you disrespect today might be the one signing your paycheck tomorrow. See you in the next one.